It's a nationwide problem, and if we don't put some serious demands to the people that we put in office to make some serious change, all the marching and all the protesting we're doing is in vain. We need some serious legislation where they're going to show transparency, where the police officers, if they have a bad record, the people should be able to go on the line and see that. If we have bad records, people can pull up our records. Why can't we do that for the police?
Thank you, Ebony. And I do want to come in here to the crowd because some of the people who fought to stay, they're in fact on the other side of the police line, are some folks who live here in Brookland. And I hope, I think most everybody here is wearing a face covering because we are in the middle of a pandemic, not everybody able to maintain social distance. But let me ask you, Joe Wagner, our photographer, is going to come around here. Ma'am, can we talk to you again? We're live on Fox 5 again. Tell our viewers, they're looking at you right here, the reason why you wanted to come out today and maintain your ground and get as close as you could to the president.
Because this is my country, this is my neighborhood, this is the public sidewalk, this is my church. And we have to protect our freedoms. And we have to make sure that people like George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery don't get murdered anymore. I want to protect democracy and freedom, and that's the most important thing. Peaceful demonstrations.
I was a little bit surprised that the police commanders were insistent that you guys move, and yet they gave in. They realized that you just wanted to be here peacefully, and they allowed you to stay fairly close to where the motorcade went by.
We're senior citizens. We're not going anywhere fast. And we're Seniors United for Social and Racial Justice.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And guys, I don't know if you were able to see when the president went by. It looked like he had his arm up on the one of those handrails up above the window. You could see his cuffed white dress shirt inside his his suit coat, and he didn't wave. He didn't do anything else. He just kind of was holding on to his his handrail there and made the turn and went by. So who knows whether he was looking to see the folks that were out here, but he did go by him. And I would say, guys, that since this whole thing began, I know last week he left the White House to go to Florida for the launch of the SpaceX rocket and walked over to St. John's Episcopal Church yesterday. But this is probably, since all the major protesting and the rioting of the last few nights around the country and here in D.C., this is the closest he's gotten to real people. And again, he had his arm up, blocking his view of the window. So it seemed to me, casual observer, that he was not interested in really looking out and seeing who was here. He must have known that the Secret Service are directing D.C. police to keep people back so that they couldn't get as close as possible to see him. I want to just talk to this gentleman. Sir.
George Floyd.
Live on Fox 5.
George
Why did you
Floyd.
come out today? I mean, this was as close as you were probably going to get to the president. What if you had a chance to bend his ear, if he took the time, what would you say?
That there's no place for hate, and all of our neighbors are out here today to denounce what he stands for, the divisiveness that he's trying to stoke amongst D.C. natives and Washingtonians alike. And we're here to say George Floyd's life matter, like the countless black women and men who's lost their lives to violence, to police brutality, and racism alike.
There's clearly a difference between passionate and peaceful protesting than some of the stuff we've seen in the city late at night, I gather, right? And you guys defended your right to be as close as you could to the presidential motorcade.
I just want to make clear that what people are calling looting and rioting is a very small part of what is happening in this broader moment. And so let's not be distracted to what we are all standing here for. And so that is a very small portion of what's happening. And I'm proud to stand with neighbors here to say George Floyd's lives matter, Breonna's lives matter, and the countless women and men whose lost their lives to police brutality's lives matter.
What's your name, sir?
Zachary Parker.
Thank you, Zachary. Appreciate it. All right, guys, so I'm going to send it back into you. I mean, we don't know how long the president is going to be, there at the shrine to the late Pope John Paul II, who is now a saint. But, if he leaves the same way he came, these folks will have a chance to, let him hear, if he could hear, how they're feeling about things in the country right now, and we'll stick around for that. We're not sure how long the wreath laying and the moment of silence is going to be. Probably not that long. So I don't know if we're going to stay on the air and you'll come back to us or what have you. But
we'll
be here with these folks. I would say a couple hundred strong.
Yeah, let's just stay with you right now, Bob, for a little bit. I'll give you a few seconds to see if you can find maybe some other people who you could talk to out there.
Oh, sure.
The president is expected to be coming back shortly. This was not going to take all that long, and if they run according to schedule, he will actually be leaving the Shrine, the Cultural Center, again within the next 5 minutes. So you should see him coming back through shortly. In the meantime, I want to go over some of this statement because this is fascinating with the timing of how this comes out. When we talked about it, Bobby, you said it very eloquently. Bob, I'll let you try to wrangle up some more protesters, but Bob went through this quite eloquently as far as the difference between the Catholic diocese and the cultural center, essentially the shrine, the Pope John Paul, the St. John Paul II shrine, which is where President Trump is right now. The Archdiocese of Washington, the Archbishop, really cannot control what happens there. But at the same time that President Trump is visiting the shrine, the Archbishop of Washington issues a statement saying that he's baffled and he finds it baffling and reprehensible that any Catholic facility would allow itself to be, in his words, egregiously misused and manipulated in a fashion that violates our religious principles. And then he goes on to talk about St. John Paul II himself. This is the Archbishop of Washington's words, saying Pope John Paul II was an ardent defender of the rights and dignity of human beings. His legacy bears vivid witness to that truth. He certainly would not condone the use of tear gas and other deterrents to silence, scatter, or intimidate them for a photo opportunity in front of a place of worship and peace. Strong words from the Archbishop of Washington, quoting a former pope, now St. John Paul II, or referring to the former pope as the president is visiting the center named for that former pope, now St. John Paul II. So, Bob, a lot of dichotomy going on here when it comes to what's happening here in this very small area. We're now about 4 miles from the White House, but Bob, right where you are, when it comes to what the Archdiocese is saying, and then the president, of course, visiting yet another religious facility, in this case, named for a former pope here in Washington.
I know, Stephen. Anybody who has any kind of job gets a ton of emails that can overrun their phones or their computers. My pocket has been buzzing. I happened to pick up right before the motorcade came through just to see in case it was a worthwhile email, and sure enough it was from the Public Affairs Office for the Archdiocese of Washington, and I was rather surprised when I read the statement that Archbishop Wilton Gregory put out, and clearly ahead of the president's visit to this Catholic institution just down the street here, that the Archbishop was not happy about it, but as you mentioned, had really no control. And as you're looking at this, it's crazy to think how things can change in a week's time, Steve, because almost every story we had done at Fox 5 in the last 2 months was related to the coronavirus, and the message being, keep your distance, don't leave your homes. Yes, some of the communities just this week are entering phase 1. Maryland and parts of Virginia entered phase 1 a week or so ago. D.C. just entering it as well. It's amazing how this story, the reaction to the killing of George Floyd a week ago yesterday, has so consumed everybody, obviously so, reasonably so, and yet while you're seeing most everyone with a mask on, a face covering, people are right up next to each other, and it's wild that this thing is so passionate for so many people that they've kind of let their guard down in terms of the social distancing because of the coronavirus. They almost just don't care. There are some folks here that we want to say hello to. Can we speak to you, Fox 5?
I think there may be some better people.
Okay, can we? How you doing?
I don't think my voice is
okay.
Needs to be heard.
No problem. Let me see. Let's see if there's. Look at this little guy. All right. No. How you doing? Is his child? Are you someone with this guy? Yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
Work your way down the line right now. I'll let you know that officially, according to the president's schedule, he was due to leave the shrine about a minute ago, be back at the White House by 11:55. Not to deviate from this story, Bob, but because you brought it up with the coronavirus, lost in this, some good news as the city of D.C. reported only, and I say only because there are still some, 29 new cases of the coronavirus in the last 24 hours. And if you've been following for the last several weeks, many days, it was 10 times that number. So to have that number down to 29 is a good sign. Hopefully, through the protests that we've seen over the last couple of days, that number won't shoot back up again. Also been following along with some of the White House pool that is with the president right now, Bob. What you're seeing here, they are saying, is the largest gathering of protesters that they have seen since they left the White House. Although up along New York Avenue, along North Capitol Street, protesters were lining the routes. They're just saying that this is the largest gathering in one place that they saw between the White House and the Shrine, is right where you are. Estimating it maybe to be 200 people. Would you say it's about that?
Yeah, I'd say 200 to 300 because look, you got this hill here. So I don't know if Joe, you can see kind of there's a hill with a lot of people, and then if we pan across 4th Street over to the Conference of Catholic Bishops property, this triangle between the streets here, you've got a couple hundred more. So I would say maybe 300 or 400 people are here, and obviously a lot of them have a lot to say. Ma'am, can we ask you why you came out here?
I'm here in solidarity with the Black community.
And this is, we've been talking to our viewers and explaining this is the closest a lot of people have been able to get to the president since all this began. I mean, even when he left the White House yesterday, the military police pushed people quite a ways away. Why did you want to be right here, and do you have a message for the president?
I'm here in solidarity with the Black community, and everybody should be out here supporting as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ma'am. And you see there are a few kids here, and obviously we spoke to, there's a theological school near here, so you have some seminarians dressed in just street clothes, not in their heavy robes out here as well, in part of the gathering here that's just across again from Mary's Shrine. You're hearing the bells toll. Initially, Steve, we were told that the president was going to be here at 11:15. So I don't know if the timeline has shifted a bit because he was running about 15, 20 minutes late, according to my watch. And yes, we know it's going to be just a brief visit here. And this is interesting because these people here, along with us, frankly, are out in the street now, kind of not where they're supposed to be. And you can see that folks aren't giving them a hard time. Sir, can we say hello? How are you? What brought you out?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, all right, no problem. Sir, let me see your sign, fascist script. What's your thought? You saw the president's motorcade go by and you see a lot of your fellow citizens out here protesting like you are.
I'd say that fascist grifters and con artists like Mango Mussolini should be locked up, not protesters against racist police violence.
And it says it all from your opinion, obviously.
That says a good part of it.
Thank you very much, sir. And again, guys, D.C. police at this location are doing most of the security work here. We did see some undercover plainclothes officers join them as well, but I don't see them right here. So it's pretty much uniformed D.C. police who are on the front lines here, trying to get as close as they can to the president, whether he'll hear it or not, in his armored limousine. That Black Lives Matter, and they'd love him to hear it and see them. And this is about as close as they're going to get, probably, for some time.
I know that from the folks that you talked to, even before we went on the air, you were talking with a number of the folks who were there. It seems like this particular gathering has a lot of people from that neighborhood, and we talked about, obviously, Catholic University is in a residential area. Do you get the feeling that a lot of the folks who were just at this particular intersection are folks from that specific area?
Yeah, because you know what? There's nowhere to park anywhere near here. So you had to really walk here. We're parked about maybe a half mile or so down the road ourselves, but we got here fairly early. Initially, these streets were open, and then they were closed. Initially, Joe, if you look to the left here, this is the street to the left here. Joe, you want to go to the left here? Down, this is the street that the president went down. So you go off Michigan Avenue down to the John Paul II Shrine. Earlier, you could drive up and down this, and there were a few protesters right outside the property. They had barricades along the street, adjacent to the John Paul II Shrine, and there were two women down there. I drove right by. There was absolutely nowhere to park. you were not allowed to park on the street. All the parking lots were blocked by either Secret Service police or Catholic University campus police or DC police. They had tow trucks out, DC police tow trucks, so nobody could park anywhere near here. And that was like at about, say, 10 o'clock, an hour before this thing was going to happen. And now, in the last half hour or so, before the president showed up, there was anywhere near here to park. So my sense is, and as you mentioned from the people we spoke to earlier,
right,
a little before 11, that these folks are from the neighborhood, from the Brookland neighborhood, who could get here.
Couple of things, Bob.
Easily,
one, the president was expected to be there for about 20 minutes. That 20 minutes is nearly up. So he is, we expect him to come back your way soon, Bob, as that motorcade is about to head back to the White House. So keep an eye out for that. Second of all, to recap, before we came out to you, Bob, of course, we were listening to the mayor and the police chief. They have wrapped up what they were talking about earlier today. But D.C.'s police chief, as far as the activity outside of the White House and the protesters that were cleared out in front of the area by St. John's Church before the president walked over there for what is now an infamous photo opportunity, D.C.'s police chief said they had no part in that. He said that was federal action. He said he was made aware that that people would be cleared just moments before that happened. There we can see the president and the first lady standing. Bob, I know you can't see it right now, but they are standing in front of a wreath outside of the shrine, and this is outside of the famous statue of Pope John Paul II, St. John Paul II. Outside of the shrine that now bears his name. This is the former Pope John Paul II Cultural Center, now officially known as the St. John Paul the Second National Shrine. The president and the first lady standing there facing the statue of the Pope and the wreath that has been laid there. And again, we were told that this was to mark the 100th birthday of the now St. John Paul II. However, as Bob and I both pointed out, that birthday was actually nearly 1 month ago. Bob?
Yeah, hey, and I wanted this lady we've been standing here with. What's your thoughts on how things are going, how this president has responded to the death of George Floyd and Aubrey before that, and the protesting on the street and some of the rioting and looting on the street?
Can I just say I am a native Washingtonian, and I actually grew up just down the street from here, right, a few blocks. So my mother was here when they had the riots after MLK was killed. But to be 53 and to have two African American male sons, two African American grandsons, I don't know what to expect for their future. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like every day you wonder when your son leaves the house, like my son uses the metro, like is he ever just going to get stopped just for being black? You know, and then for this man to come outside and stand in front of a church with a Bible. What's that supposed to mean? They use the Bible also to keep us in slavery. Let's remember that also. So what does that mean that you came out here and held up a Bible? You want to keep us in slavery in 2020 with the word of God when it says to love your neighbor, treat your brother as you treat yourself? This man doesn't, he's been living in a bubble for so long, he can't even relate to the empathy of the people around here. He can't even relate to what it feels like to have somebody stripped from your life just like that in a matter of seconds. They're gone. These people are never coming back, not to mention the hundreds of thousands of people who are still dying from this disease that he said never existed. And y'all put this idiot in office. I vote. For all you millennials out here who have told me that voting doesn't matter, stay in the house. Stop making everybody look bad by doing all of this unnecessary extra stuff that does not help our race. If you want to help, get your education that your ancestors hung from trees for you to have, just so you can read for yourself. And you want to come out here and make them look like they got hung for nothing? Wake up, Black America. If we gonna ever pick a time to unify as a race, it better be now or else.
What is your name?
My name is Kat. You can call me Kat, but my family knows me as Kimberly.
Thank you, Kimberly and Kat. Wow. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sometimes you approach the right people and sometimes you don't. Usually we're lucky. Sometimes people just don't want to express their feelings, and we totally respect and understand that. Thanks to Kat/Kimberly for being out here. And there's another gentleman out here that we can say a quick hello to while we wait for the president's motorcade, and this is Kenya McDuffie, Ward 5 council member. Kenya, do you have a quick second? Can I interrupt there? Sorry about that. We're live on Fox 5, waiting for the president's motorcade to come on back. Kenya, your feelings these last several days here in your city, and seeing the president here come by, and the Archbishop of Washington is not happy that he's come here. What's your thoughts of, how things have been in this city, your city, the last several days?
I'll tell you, Bob, it's been hard to articulate and put into words my thoughts. On the one hand, I'm deeply saddened by the loss of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, but the list goes on. And what happened to Mr. Floyd demands justice for his family, for his community. And I am deeply disappointed at the president, at his antics from last night, and the fact that he's chosen Ward 5 and the sacred grounds in this area of our city to use as a backdrop for his production. This is not what justice looks like. This is what politics looks like. And people right here want justice. And until they get justice, I hope that these protests continue peacefully in cities like the District of Columbia and across the country. I'm frustrated, I'm angry, and frankly, as a lot of people are around the city, I'm sure they're trying to make sure that they control the rage that's inside right now. To be able to watch a video where a black man's life is taken from him at the hands of law enforcement, not once, but when you see it happen to people across the country, year after year after year, people want real change, not simply rhetoric and lip service. To say that you're with us in solidarity is not enough. To address these issues fundamentally and systemically in law enforcement departments around the country should be everybody's priority, not just in places where these things actually happen.
And we're speaking with Kenya McDuffie, D.C. council member representing Ward 5, a lawmaker. Any laws that you've thought about in the last several days as we wait for the president's motorcade to come by us again that could be enacted at this time, that could maybe help or change things in some way from a legal point of view?
You know, as people know, I've led the way on criminal justice reform here in the District of Columbia. We passed a comprehensive bill to reform the police department here in the District of Columbia. Sadly, the reforms didn't come as quickly as we would have liked, and we still got some ways to go, clearly. I will tell you, I have seen a distinction between how MPD has handled peaceful protests like this and how their federal counterparts have held it. I don't want to make excuses for any law enforcement department. On the other hand, we need to make sure that it goes beyond criminal justice reform and law enforcement. That's one aspect of justice that black communities need to have. There's also an economic justice that needs to occur in these conversations, particularly as the city looks at our budget right now. If after these protests subside, we don't see meaningful change with actual policies that go along with funding and commitments, then it's not real justice. And I won't be prepared to support it.
Kenyon, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Kenya McDuffie, Ward 5 council member. This is his ward, Ward 5 here in Northeast D.C. He's out here with the protesters today, and pretty passionate folks we've spoken to, Steve and Wisdom, and they're still here quietly waiting for the presidential motorcade to leave the one shrine down the street that's to Saint Pope John Paul II, and he'll pass by the shrine to the Virgin Mary on his way back to the White House, and we'll stick around here and see how that goes. And as I mentioned, the president was sitting on the right side of the limousine in the back, and he was, as close to these folks as he was ever going to get, and had his arm up holding kind of like a handlebar there. And from my vantage point, it didn't look like he was looking out and seeing, and probably being in the armored limousine, he wasn't hearing the folks out here, but they're here. Steve?
Bob, quite impassioned statements, both from the Councilman McDuffie, talking about the president choosing Ward 5 for his visit right now. And then, of course, from that resident Kat/Kimberly, who said she grew up right down the road from there, talking about her mom being in D.C. for the riots after Martin Luther King was killed. And then, of course, saying that she has several sons and several grandsons that she's concerned about on a daily basis here in the nation's capital, and quite impassioned, calling for peace there and unity and togetherness. Bob Barnard, thanks very much for talking with those folks out there outside of the National Shrine. We do expect the president's motorcade to come back through any moment. I do believe that we will continue to cover that for you online. We'll let you know what happens if anything else changes. But at this point, you see several rows of D.C. police standing in between what would be the motorcade route back, assuming it comes back the same way it went, and those several hundred protesters who are there outside of the D.C. Shrine. All right, the mayor is, looks like she's still answering some questions as well. We heard from the police chief earlier saying the D.C. police were not involved in the clearing of the park outside of St. John's Church in D.C. last night for the president's photo opportunity. We'll continue to cover all aspects of this story. We'll have a full wrap-up for you today on the 5 at 4 p.m. And, of course, updates throughout our social media. Bob's going to continue to stay on the scene there in Northeast D.C. We'll update our digital channels as necessary throughout the day. We'll see you at 4 p.m. for a wrap-up today, and then bright and early at 4 a.m. tomorrow for Fox 5 News.
Facebook page and on fox5dc.com, but we are going to stay here. This is photojournalist Joe Wagner and Bob Barnard here in Northeast Washington at the intersection of Michigan Avenue and 4th Street Northeast, outside the National Shrine to the Virgin Mary, just down the street from the journalist Joe Wagner and Bob Barnard here in Northeast. He was born in May, he died in April, but here it is June 2nd, and the President and First Lady have gone to the shrine to John Paul II to lay a wreath there. So we're not sure why this day, this place, but it's where the President is. He's there now, and was, according to the early readouts, supposed to be already back at the White House by now. He arrived here about 20 minutes late, so he's still, we can't see from here, it's just about a half mile down the road. So if he's left the shrine to John Paul II, it's, just a matter of minutes before we'll see him. So we're going to stay here, and we're showing you D.C. police, which have kind of held people off, obviously out of the intersection, but not as far back as they initially wanted. They were hoping these folks would be back on the other side of the intersection, but these folks reasoned with the police commanders here and were allowed to stay. They did put up police tape to keep them back, and you see there are a lot of police here working to keep folks back. But this is about as close as they're going to get to the president, that anybody's going to get to the president. Maybe along some streets between here and the White House, people are lining the sidewalks, but you've got, several hundred folks here, and obviously passionate but peaceful, and would love to bend the president's ear if he would look at them as he leaves here. He'll be on the other side of the car, so there's a pretty good chance if he didn't acknowledge them or see them on the way in, he's not going to see them on the way out. But we're just going to wait here just to kind of let you share in the moment as their president, our commander-in-chief, will be driving by us with the First Lady back to the White House shortly after a visit here to Northeast D.C. that the Archbishop of Washington, Wilton Gregory, called baffling and reprehensible. That a Catholic facility or entity like the Shrine to John Paul II would allow the president to come there, considering that just yesterday, presumably with his authority and encouragement, military police fired upon peaceful protesters who were near Lafayette Park so that the president could rather remarkably walk out of the White House grounds and over to St. John's Episcopal, which had been, in a sense, firebombed. Hey, Joe, I think they may be leaving here. Firebombed and defaced the night before. So we're going to see if the president is heading out here in just a moment. And we'll stay with you here on the Fox 5 social media platforms. It's a second motorcycle officer. Here comes the president. Black lives matter! 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 All right, so there you see. Sorry for any profanity that you're hearing. Some people are pissed and flipping the bird to the president. But anyhow, vote him out. They're yelling, vote him out. See if this priest will talk to us. Guys, we're going to see if the Catholic priest... Father, how are you?
Yeah, I have nothing to say to anybody from your network. Nothing at all.
Okay, all right. Okay. That's fine. Fair enough.
You guys will spin it in the base.
So there you go.
I'll say something to the people in your network, and don't worry.
What's that?
I will say something to the people of your network. Yeah, don't worry, it will not be vulgar.
That's fine. Yeah, hold 1 second.
Black lives matter! Black lives matter! Black lives matter! Black lives matter! Black lives matter!
Here, let's talk to this gentleman here. Sir.
To the people who watch Fox, locally or nationally, have you not seen enough? Have you not heard enough? People are dying in the streets because of this. Your president fired on people in the streets because of this. Enough is enough. Say their names. Black Lives Matter.
And with that, we'll wrap it up. Okay, guys? So there you go. So people are leaving. The president's gone, and it's been real. It's been real. Back into you, folks. Good. So here's the deal. How you doing, sir?
right about like 15 minutes ago. There was a person who was jumped by a cop in like a white uniform and then a couple of cops in blue uniforms. I don't know the difference. And I attempted to be a white ally and just put my body in front of the cops. They were using their batons, and a cop just sprayed me. It's my first time being pepper sprayed. I deeply appreciate the community members who were helping me because they knew what to do when I did it.
Guys, if you are a community leader and you want demonstrable change, please, I insist on you not attacking the police officers here. Be safe. Be safe. Love each other. Be safe. Love each other. Be safe. You don't need to get away. You don't need to buy anything, bro. You take that. Listen. Be safe. Go.
you have refused to leave the roadway, you will be placed under arrest on the charge of disorderly conduct. If you do not cooperate and accompany the arresting officer,